typical TEFL talk, you don't hear very much about topic of money, personal finance, investing, just how to keep yourself healthy in a financial way, which is very much part of keeping yourself healthy mentally, I think, because the number one stress that most people have is about money. So I'm just going to share my screen and hope that it does it. Okay, I was going to check back and see if that's working. Well, Lizzie, you can tell me if you can see that, can't you?
Yeah, looks good to me. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so what this is really about how to grow little acorns into big trees, because I'm really happy to be catching teachers near the beginning of their career, because you've got all that time to get this stuff sorted, and really the acorn that you plant now is the tree that you take shade under in the future. So this is essential money know-how for EFL teachers. Obviously we've only got 45 minutes, so it's not in detail, but hopefully it will give you like some steps and some things to start thinking about, because I never thought about any of these things. And like Lizzie, I wish I had a time travel machine and could go back 20 years. These are all the countries that I taught in when I was an English teacher, and I lived in these places, and not a single one of them was I ever given any input or training into anything to do with money. So I'm talking about pensions, what to do when you retire, anything about saving. And a lot of people might think that that's not the provision of the your employer to tell you, but when you're moving around the world like that, as so many of us are, somebody's got to be helping you not slip through the gaps, because the consequences of not thinking about this stuff for your entire life, and especially when you're abroad and you're not maybe got the safety net of being in your own country, and this stuff kind of maybe happening a bit more automatically, is I have met people who are in their 70s teaching at summer school, and in the UK, residential summer school, teaching teenagers 5 days a week, going on excursion on day 6, and they're in their 70s and mid 70s, and they have no pension, and that is where you can end up. So I taught in all of these countries, didn't, and I just went around having fun and having adventures and all of the things that a lot of us will do. And you can still do all of those things and look after your money stuff. And so I got out, but sort of segued out of teaching, and moved into materials writing. And these are some of the books that I wrote. And I wrote, bits of books and whole books and things for people's websites, a lot of stuff for the British Council. But I was a freelancer, so I still didn't have any of these safety nets. And obviously, as a freelancer, there's even nobody at all to help you with this stuff. And although I do get some royalties from some of these books, you are talking, pocket money per year. So this is not my retirement plan either. But I did think that I was moving into something more secure financially, and I certainly wasn't. And so about 3 to 4 years ago now, my sister nagged me a lot. My sister's got a more stable job in the UK. She never left the country, and she would always like to ask me what I was doing about pension stuff, and I'd just be like, "This is so boring." I thought I was the exciting, adventurous one, and after a while, it kind of got through to me that I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a pension, I didn't have any kind of investments. I did have savings because I was quite a good saver. But they certainly weren't enough to retire off. And I had convinced myself that they were, even though they would have lasted me 2 years at most. So what I didn't have was no financial security, and I certainly didn't have a steady income, because by then I was teaching and writing. And so what happened then was really I just sorted this out for myself. I started asking myself questions, starting with really basic stuff, because I didn't know anything. My degree's in philosophy. My background is in English teaching. I certainly did not have some kind of financial knowledge that I had tucked up my sleeve. I had to start even just trying to work out what the questions are. And it's all very well, you can be like, well, ask Google, ask ChatGPT, but if you don't know what questions to ask because you don't understand the topic at all, then it's really hard. So I would try to ask people who were much cleverer than me questions, but I couldn't get the right question to get the right answer. And then when I did sometimes hit on the right question, I didn't understand the answer. So I really came from a position of completely knowing nothing. But once I'd taught myself, and I'd opened all these accounts and I'd got a pension, and I realized, oh, actually, this is really easy once you understand it. Then I realized that my background in teaching and writing educational materials meant that I could teach other people in this sector. And so that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. And so, you know, if you're wondering, like, what can you do about this stuff for yourself, this is kind of what I'm going to give you a bit of a tour through today. So I don't want anybody to stop traveling. I don't want anybody to stop teaching. I think this is a really rewarding profession in lots of ways. I don't really think it's rewarding financially, but you can still make this stuff work for you so that you grow money from your money for the future. Okay, so the first thing you need to maybe get good at is saving. So I've got a couple of like saving challenges that I run that make this a bit more fun for people. I'll give you the links in a minute. So, one of them, the 52-week one, you start in week one saving £1 or €1 or $1 or whatever it is in the currency that makes sense for you. So, you build up over the year until you are eventually saving 52 of those dollars or euros or whatever a week. And I've got a spreadsheet that helps you with that, because I think the thing that you have to do if you're not a natural saver, then you need to make it a bit more fun for yourself, and you need to have a record and you need to track it, just like any other habit that you're trying to build, because saving is just a habit, and it is a habit that will prepare the foundation for you. And the point with all of this stuff is it's not that you have to have a lot of money, you just have to have a habit and stick to it. Somebody who saves £1 a day, $1 a day, $1 a week, like whatever it is still in a better position than somebody who doesn't save anything. And a lot of people will say, oh, I can't save, I don't have enough money. But I know lots of people that earn 3 or 4 times more than me, and they don't have any savings. They spend everything. And so, who really is better off financially? Me, who earns not that much, to be honest, but saves and invests, or people that spend all of their money? And we think it's the people that spend all their money, but it isn't. It's the people that save. So, one of the things that you need to kind of start rethinking is how much money you have in your current accounts. Like, so most people just have one bank account, everything's in there, and they spend from it. If they don't spend it all by the end of the month, then they consider themselves to have saved money, even though it's just still in that same pot. So what you should start doing is have one account that's for your income and your outgoings, your bills, your rent and stuff, and another account that has interest, and you want the highest interest rate that you can find, where you can still get the money whenever you need. And that is where most of your money should be during the month. So you should only have, in fact, I only have about 1 week, 10 days worth of money in my actual current account. And sometimes that gets really low. Like, I let it go to €100 before I put any more money in. Why? Because money in your current account is doing nothing. It's just sitting there. So I've got money in the savings account, and as I'm a freelancer, I have to pay the government taxes. Like, I have to do that myself. It's not taken out of my salary like when you're an employee. So even the money that I set aside for the tax man is in an account earning interest, because I don't have to give it to them for 3 months. So I make it earn interest in that time. And when you get into this habit of being okay with your current account not having very much money in it because all your money's working somewhere, that's just free money for nothing. So it's that kind of stuff that I would like to think that you would start doing, is to have a current account that's for your current income and outcome, and accounts that will earn interest where everything else sits. And you can have lots of them. I mean, I've got pots for various different things, and it keeps my money separate. I know what it's for, and it's all earning interest. And, so what if I have to spend a bit of time moving that money around? It takes seconds. You do it on apps. It's not a big deal. So that's a really foundational step. Okay. Now, not all of your money is going to be in savings accounts, but we'll talk about that in a second. So, the two savings things that I have to encourage you to save are at these links. So the bottom one is takes 52 weeks. The other one is a 1 year challenge that is based on windfalls, which is just money that you get when you weren't expecting it. Because supermarket vouchers, wins on, lottery, birthday presents, all of these kind of things, there can be quite fun things to save because you didn't know you were going to get them, so you could save them. Okay, excuse me. So that's how to start saving. Now, the thing that you're going to start saving up for originally, and this is another like foundational layer in your financial security, is an emergency fund. And an emergency fund is typically, sorry, what's wrong with me? An emergency fund is typically thought of as being 3 to 6 months of your essential expenses set aside in an account where it's earning money, but one that you can access anytime, but that you typically don't. Like, you don't carry that bank card around with you because the temptation to spend it is too high. It's one maybe doesn't even have a bank card. Maybe the money has to be transferred to your normal account, but it's there to cover things like rent, bills, food, the thing that you really have to, any bills that your children bring about. So it's so that if you are for some reason unable to work or out of a job or ill or anything like that, that you weren't expecting, that's money that will look after you for 3 to 6 months. And when you have that, and it's earning interest for you, hopefully, because you put it in the right kind of account, you have peace of mind. And it means that you don't have the same fears about what's going to happen to you when a bad thing does happen, because there's no problem in the world that can't be made worse by lack of money. And of course, money doesn't solve every problem, but it does at least mean that that's something you don't have to worry about. And I think that every TEFL teacher who is living outside of their own country or who has close family in a different country, you at the very least want to have set aside, doesn't matter how long it takes you to build it up, enough money to fly you that day home. Because imagine, something happens, you get some news and you have to buy a plane ticket or a train ticket or whatever it is, and you have to go that day. That can be extremely expensive. So after this session, go home or get back on your phone and just find out what is a flight or whatever transport you need to get you home going to cost you tonight. And that's the amount of money that you want to start saving, because that will make so much difference. You don't ever want to go into debt to solve an emergency situation, because now you've got your emergency situation and you've got a debt, and that's going to make your life even harder. So that's the first thing that I would try to sort out. Okay, some kind of emergency fund, and you decide whether you think 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. It really depends. If you've got a partner who's earning, maybe you would have a shorter emergency fund. It's up to you. Okay, so that's one thing to say in place. And then the next thing, this is the number one question people ask me, like, what's the one thing that I should do about money? And I think it's become pension perfect. Like, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the present perfect. Now you want to get just as good and just as knowledgeable about pensions. So this is a thing that we just don't seem to talk about in TEFL. And maybe because you're moving around and you're going to different countries, you think maybe it's not an option for you, or you think it's too much hassle. And you think, what's the point of having pension pots all over the world? Well, you can still access those pensions. You will be able to draw the money out, or they will be able to arrange to pay it into another account or some other solution. But the point is, it's better to have them than not to have them. And you just, when you open them, which we'll talk about in a second, when you open them, find out what happens if I leave the country. Just ask, because then you'll know. It might be a load of admin for you in the future, big pain in the neck, but it's nowhere near as much of a pain in the neck as not having anything to retire on and have to work 6 days a week at summer school just to survive. So what is a pension? A lot of people think that a pension is some special and kind of mysterious thing. Now, obviously, there's different types of pensions. Some countries there will be a state pension. Other countries they have a slightly different system. And so, again, I can't go into loads of detail about it. But a pension is basically just income when you retire. If you don't have income when you retire, you are not retiring. Okay, so that's why you want to have one. But pensions are even better than that, because a pension is basically a special kind of bank account. And it's special because, one, the money is invested. It will be invested in the stock market. It might be invested in bonds, which are basically loans that we lend the government to various different countries. And it might be invested in real estate. It might be invested in gold. Those are the main things that might be in there. Gold would be a tiny amount. Real estate would probably be a small amount as well. It's mainly going to be a mixture of stocks and bonds. So by stocks, I mean you're owning part of companies. So people think there's pensions and there's investments, but pensions are just a kind of investment. If you feel that the stock market is scary, well, a pension is really boring, right? So it can't be. How scary can it be if it's also in pensions? So um, you don't need to necessarily understand lots and lots and lots about the stock market to have a pension. You don't need to pick companies or anything like that. It's just a product. And the great thing about pensions, as opposed to other types of investments, is that they usually reduce your tax bill. So, because you're contributing into a private pension, or workplace pensions, it might be, that will usually reduce your tax bill in some way. Depends on the country, how they do it. Sometimes it means, like I'm in Spain, that means that my tax bill is just lowered. If you're in the UK and other countries that do it this way, the government actually puts money. It basically puts what you would have paid tax, it puts it back in, but into your pension. So the government is topping up your pensions. So pensions are free money in the form of reduced taxes. And obviously, you can't take a pension until a certain age. And again, that will vary. So it really is, you're saving and investing for the future, and you can't take it until you get to that age. But that's a good thing. It's money that you can't touch. But you won't only want a pension because it's money that you can't touch until you get to a certain age. And maybe you want to buy a house or do something else with that money. So you want to probably have other kinds of investments, not just a pension. But a pension is the one thing that I always say people should do, because it lowers your tax bill and because it's going to look after you when you're older. And it might be doing that on top of a state pension, depends where you live. But every time you move country, just find out what's the deal on pensions, how much money, how much tax contributing into a private pension. Just start asking that question, and then you will automatically start finding out the other answers about, like, what happens if I leave and how old do I have to be to take it. Okay. But you must have something, because the one thing you cannot do is save your way to retirement. It's just not possible. You could save your whole life and you still probably won't have enough to live off for the 20 to 30 years that hopefully you will have when you retire. You just can't save numbers big enough. And one of the reasons you can't is because of inflation, because inflation is always eating away at the value of the money that you're saving. So your saving pot might be growing, but it's being reduced all the time by inflation. And the interest in a normal savings account is not going to be inflation. Investing is the only way to be inflation. And I'm going to show you the power of investing with one graph. Okay, you do not have to be good at maths to be able to deal with this stuff. The amount of times I've made mistakes about maths when I'm giving these kind of talks, but I am still investing happily, earning money off my money. So please don't think that if you're not good at maths or you don't like numbers that it matters. This graph has been created by a compound interest calculator online. They're free, they're very easy to use. So, this is just an example of what the difference is between saving and investing. So, what I've said is, imagine that you are saving and investing 100 euros or dollars or whatever a month, and you do this for 30 years, and you are getting 5% interest rate. And 5%, I've used that number because that allows for inflation. Like, inflation might be 2 to 3%. So I'm allowing for that. Okay. This is just your profits without regarding inflation. Okay. So if you did what I just said with the 100 a year, then you would have put in the blue line, which is your total contributions would have been 36,000, which is like great, but it's not going to be anywhere near as much as if you'd invested it, and that's the red line. And the reason that that is so high compared with the other one is because compound interest is this amazing mathematical formula that you do not have to understand, but it just means interest growing on the interest, growing on the interest, growing on the interest. The compound interest is why credit cards are so dangerous. And we all somehow seem to know that. We know that the debt will grow and grow and grow, but we don't seem to realize that the opposite is true. That if you have money and there's interest growing on it, then that's really an amazing thing. So, this 79,000 that would be produced from your 36,000 worth of contributions is also obviously not enough to retire on. So, I'm not saying these are the numbers you must have. I'm just trying to show you the power of it. The more money you put in, the higher that other line is going to be, and the longer you've got. You know, if you're 20 now and you're going to be saving and investing for 40 years, then that graph goes even more vertical. So you can play around with compound interest calculators online, and you can put in the figures of what you think you could save per month. And you could use 5%, 6% as a conservative kind of estimate. The stock market on average returns 8, 9, 10% on average per year, or it has done historically. So these are not unreasonable figures. That 10% one doesn't take into account inflation. That's why I've sort of made the number smaller, just to not give you any kind of crazy idea about what you can do here. So the pillars, if you like, of financial security, these things that I've just said, they are saving, which doesn't have to be boring. If you know, like I've given you those couple of challenges that you can sign up for and do it in a slightly more fun way. But having an emergency fund is another foundational thing to your financial stability, your peace of mind, your mental health, and having a pension is another one. And outside of that, you can be investing in things that are not pensions, but they are still the same thing. It will still be the stock market. You'll probably still have bonds. You might have some real estate, a little bit of gold, and other things that you don't really need to understand in order to own these products. Okay, so on the courses that I teach, I help people understand, like, what is the stock market, which is the right balance of stocks and bonds for me, because I do think it's important to understand how this stuff works. You can make better decisions. You can handle, you know, if you hear the news saying that the stock markets have crashed that day, then when you understand how this stuff works, you won't panic. You won't pull all your money out and lose a load of money. You will just stay calm and be okay. The only people that lose money in stock market crashes are the people that sell. If you stay in, you just wait for it to recover, and it eventually, in time, will come back and usually be higher than it was. So, there's one other thing, and this bit, if it's the only thing that you remember about this talk, then that I would be fine with that, because this is really important. So, whenever you open any kind of pension account, investing account, and even some savings accounts in some countries, not all, they usually charge some kind of management fee. And different countries seem to have different rules and regulations about this, about how high these fees can be. You know, in some countries, like pensions, like in the UK, for example, they can't have a fee higher than a certain number. But the problem is that these numbers, when you see them on your, you know, your friendly bank account that is the one that you always use, and they offer you an investing account, and they will tell you the fee, and it always looks like a low number. And even if you're not, like me, that great at maths, you'd be like, if I see the number one, I know that one is a low number, right? Like no one's kind of trying to pretend anything else, are they? And you're just like, okay, 1%, that's fine. And what you have to understand about the power of compounding interest over time is that a 1% fee is really, really high. You want to be in something lower. And I'm going to show you why. So this is another tool that I use. It's called Candid Money. It's a calculator that works out the impact of fees. So I've got a slightly different scenario in this one, whereby imagine that you start off with 1,000 That's the initial amount that you put in. You are putting in 200 a month, and again, you do it for 30 years. And you've got a 1% charge that is being applied to your account every year. 1% of what you've got in there is the fee that gets paid to the bank and deducted, or the whatever company it is that gets deducted out of your account. And so imagine that there's a 10% return. And again, you can play around with things like this and put your own figures in. So this is what the fund would be worth. And the next thing underneath that is what the charges will be, what it will have cost you over your lifetime of 30 years. Move on. Right. So hang on, has it gone too far? Wait a minute. No, that's right. Okay, so the fund itself, if you followed that and kept putting in 200 a month for that amount of years, would be 134,000. You will have lost 17,000 in charges with a 1% fee, and that is because it's not just the 1% they take out, it's what that 1% would have compounded and grown to over time, and it can't because it's been taken out. It's compounding for the bank, not for you. So you would have lost 17,000. And I don't know about you, but like that's a lot of money. Okay. A lot of money. And if you halve the fee, if you look around and you shop around for something that is just 0.5%, 0.5%, so that's not 0.5 as in 50%, no, it's 0.5%. Now you can bring that fee down to nearly 9,000, which is still a lot, but your pot is now 142,000 instead of the figure that we had before. So that's how much difference it makes. So the thing I want you to remember is try to find fees that are as close to 0.5% as you can, or lower. If you are going to be living and working in Japan, where they heavily incentivize private pensions and private investments, the fees there are like 0.02. And you can find products that are like that if you're willing to manage it yourself and not necessarily kind of buy a packaged thing from a bank. If you're just going to go and buy these things yourself, again, it's kind of stuff I teach on the course. So 0.5% is what you're aiming for, lower if you can. 0.6 is okay. 0.7, I feel like if you can, try and find something else. But once you start creeping up to 1%, you are really paying a lot. And some countries, it's very hard to find products for pensions and things like that that are, you know, reasonable. Italy, I have to say, a lot of my students are in Italy, and they struggle to find packages from their banks and things and pension products that are lower than 1%. Spain's okay, England's better. And I don't have in-depth knowledge of other countries' fees apart from Japan. Okay, so that's the thing to look for. It's so important. It is often the case that I teach people who have already got pensions and things like that, and I make them go and find out what the fees are, because again, some countries the regulations mean they have to be really transparent and upfront and tell you that right on the front page, and others it's hidden away in a PDF that you have to click through 3 different pages to get to and read very small print. And they find that they've been paying a high fee, and they're just like, oh, but it's going to be a hassle to change it and this and that. Yeah, I mean, how much hassle are you willing to take on in order to save what, like 9,000, 8,000 pounds, dollars, euros? I'm willing to do a little bit of admin for that. And usually, when you move these things anyway, you open an account with somebody else that's cheaper, and they will transfer the products over, and they do it in a couple of days at a click of a few buttons, because they want to be the one who you are paying that fee to over your lifetime. So never let the idea that it's hassle put you off moving from something that's got a high fee to a low fee, because it's so worth it. When you think how hard you work for your money, and you can keep more of it for yourself just by moving from a cheap to from an expensive to a cheap product, it's so worth it. We tend to often be willing to work really hard for stuff but not willing to do admin for it. So that's another little mindset thing to shift. A lot of our weird things about money are to do with just little stories we tell ourselves about what's too much hassle. And now I want to say one thing which is only relevant to people who have lived in the UK for 3 years at any point in their life. Doesn't matter if you are British or not. It's just, have you lived in the UK for 3 years at any period during your life? And or have you worked in the UK for a total of 3 years? So it might be that you do summer jobs, like a lot of people go back and do university type jobs in the summer. And, over time, they will accrue 3 years worth of contributions of national insurance. And so if you are overseas, you should know, and nobody tells us, that you can make up your national insurance contributions, and you can do that voluntarily until you hit 35 years of contributions, and then you can get a full UK state pension. And you can get that even if you never set foot in the country again, even if you don't intend to retire there and you retire somewhere else, you can take that pension. um, I've got a free guide to this that's at that link, which, if you think those conditions apply to you, please just read it, because the amount of people that I know who've said, "Oh, it won't apply to me. I only had a few Saturday jobs, and I only did this in the UK, and I haven't been back for years." It's like, no, it doesn't matter. Just read it and then decide whether it applies to you or not. Because I haven't met anybody yet who it didn't apply to. So you can always make up these missing years. You can continue paying until you hit the required number, which is 35. And if you're satisfying a couple of requirements, you can do it at a very cheap rate. You can pay basically 170, £180 a year for 35 years and get a full UK state pension. And the full UK state pension at the moment is about £11,500 a year. It's one of the best investments you can make. And state pensions generally are a very good investment, because we assume that most countries are not going to come to the point of economic collapse where they can't pay out the pensions. That would be a complete bankruptcy of that country before they give up pensions. So a little bit of money being funneled into the state system is usually a good bet, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you're relying on. These other things that we talked about before on top of that. But I just want people to know that if you've been in the UK, this is something that you can do. So, yes. Right. So there's one thing that I haven't talked about, and it's very much on the news everywhere. Like crypto. So I don't teach it on any of my courses. And when I first started investing, I had certain opinions about cryptocurrency that I was just like, it's gambling, you shouldn't touch it. I have since learned more about it, and I have somebody who teaches or taught me about it. I'm not yet ready to teach it to other people because I want to see what happens, but I do invest in it. So if you want to ask me something about it in the time that we've got, then please do. But it's such a big topic that I didn't want to give a whole presentation about it. But there's no point ignoring the elephant in the room at the moment, because everybody's talking about Bitcoin. So I can answer some questions, but what I would say about it is you should never invest in things that you don't understand, and you should never invest money that you can't afford to lose. And the crypto is a very, very volatile thing, and if you don't think that you can handle seeing 70% of your account wiped out in a few days, crypto is not for you. But it is obviously a very popular topic, so please ask if you want to. And if you want to find me, because I post about this stuff a lot on LinkedIn, everything to do with personal finance, then find me on LinkedIn under Nicola Prentis. And of course, my website is chilledinvestor.com, and I've got blog posts, like quite general ones, to get you into the topic. And a lot of the things that I've spoken about today, I speak about in more depth in both of those places, on LinkedIn and on my website, but also on my mailing list. So join my mailing list. It will ease you in and go into more depth about some of these things that I've spoken about. But it's a really interesting thing when you get into it, or you never have to be interested in it. You just set up your accounts and that's it. Okay, it's not something that has to require loads of your time. I've got, I don't know, 11, 12 different investing accounts, and nobody needs to have as many as that. But even though I've got 12, I don't spend any time on this. I don't spend time managing my accounts. I don't have to do things to it. The whole point of it is that it's passive investing, low risk. And that's why I didn't talk about crypto, because crypto is not low risk. But the stuff I'm talking about, pensions, investments, bonds, these are low risk things. They are passive things. And that just means that the money grows because that is what happens because of compound interest and because the stock market over time it's going up. It might have periods where it goes down, but if you look at a graph of the last 100 years, it's a steady incline. And I think the reason for that is because we're talking about global commerce. And if you believe that global commerce and people's ability to make a profit and be productive in a global sense will continue, then that is what you're investing in. And if you don't think that is going to carry on, then I think we are talking about Armageddon type situations where there are no more companies making profit anymore. And if we reach that situation, which we might, we are all going to have bigger problems than whether or not our pension is safe, because there won't be money. You won't be able to buy stuff in shops. You will need seeds and a water supply and antibiotics. And that would be what you needed to be stockpiling. So I wouldn't worry about the idea that this stuff is not going to be around in the future, because the future that where that is the case is a disaster.